So we've all watched those impressive Microsoft canned demos, but now we want to start creating our own agentic AI assets. But this proving to be a little bit more challenging than at first glance. Guys at Microsoft made it look very easy, drag and drop and a little bit of text here and there, and boom, your agent was working. But now we want to start pulling in our own organizational data. A little bit harder. I'm Craig, I'm the CTO of GTconsult, and I will be taking you through our Agentic AI series. Today we're going to look at how we use Copilot Studio to build an agentic agent with organizational data that's accessed via an API. So when I'm talking agentic agents, I'm talking about use of an autonomous AI agent. So not a reactive agent, which is a bot that I'm typing information in and it's going out and generating data. No, we want this to run by itself. So the agentic agent is kind of like a workflow where the workflow is more dynamic and can use RAG information to enhance our workflow and decide where it wants to go. In terms of our example today, we're going to be looking at a problem that we deal with internally, and we're pretty sure a lot of people do as well. We have a sales team. Those sales teams have deals, and on a daily basis, we have a sales manager who's running through those deals, identifying what the last notes were, where the deal is, and also chasing up on the sales agent around them, filling in a CRM, as well as asking them what the next steps are. And that's quite a long, laborious job, and it's very repetitive when it comes in terms of your deals. So we thought, let's automate that, and what better to do that than using an agentic agent? So let's jump into that with Copilot Studio. And what you'll notice is that there are actually 3 agentic agents here that I've created. Now, one of the ideas around creating these autonomous agentic agents is you don't want them doing too much. What are our biggest problems with AI? Well, firstly, AI hallucinates. So we want to make sure that the data that is being pushed into our AI is very precise. Secondly, the output needs to be quite precise as well in terms of an autonomous agent. We want consistency in terms of automating repetitive tasks like going through a list of CRM deals and then adding in actions. So having a multitude of these agents, each running their own process, is a much easier way to handle and a much easier way to solve those problems of hallucinations, as well as being quite precise. Now, the precise nature comes in terms of your prompt engineering. What I find a lot when we're out in the market is people start using AI and they go, it's great for certain things, but they can't get the answers that they really want, and they can't get a consistent answer coming out of AI. And a lot of that has to do with prompt engineering. So these agents are very heavy in terms of prompt engineering, and we'll see that as we look at our first CRM agent, which is our CRM jockey. For lack of a better term, this agent, when we pop in there, will be used to monitor deals that are in Zoho CRM and then send them off to the sales agent via Teams or via email, providing a list of actions that they should be applying to that deal. So opening up, on our first page, we have our overview. You'll notice this is quite text heavy. So when we have a look at the data on the screen, we have a description. This agent is used by salespeople to interact with the data in Zoho CRM. That's just a description as to what this app does. But then we give it specific instructions. So with ours, you're a Zoho CRM agent who receives questions about deals in Zoho CRM and provides insights into actions that should be taken on those deals in order to close or win them. Users can ask questions about deal stages, closing dates, owners, contacts, accounts, deal amounts, etc. So this just gives the agent a brief understanding of what it's really there for. This contextualizes what it's trying to achieve. We then start breaking up into steps, and you'll notice those steps have little hashtags next to them, such as receive the deal information. This identifies that this is a step within our flow. So within that, we say users will capture deals into Zoho, and the deals related fields such as deal name, stage, last activity, time account, etc., will be used. They have required documentation already. We need to check if there's a budget, what is the timeline, what are your pain points, etc. So at this point, we're telling the agent that it needs to receive this data so it knows what to do with it. The second is compose a table that will assess the deal. And this is really where the power of our Agentic agent comes in, by utilizing augmentation and generating the action points for our deal. So here we're looking at the account manager GT based on the knowledge from the sales playbook. Interesting one, we'll come back to that. Analyze this deal. If you're talking to the deal owner, use the provider data to understand your deal overview, your timeline information, financial details, key questions, and also look at your latest notes so that it identifies from the historical reasons of CRM what you're trying to achieve with this client or any discussions you might have had with them already. Then, having understood the above, do a write-up for the owner of the task, addressing the current status assessment, key concerns, specific next steps, etc. So here, really just about generating the content that will be presented back to the sales deal owner. Finally, we can respond with an email using the assessment table as the body, and we send an email which utilizes Office 365 Outlook with a polite tone, including the assessment table as the body, and use the deal name and the account as the subject. Lastly, we send a user a custom notification. So we get the deal ID, we specify the next steps in terms of the notes, and we kick off an action. So we've turned on orchestration. Orchestration, as it says here, determines what it next needs to do, and it gives the best response to the user. Now let's jump into a bit of the nitty-gritty of the actual agent. The top part, the instructions, is all about what it should do, but we haven't given it any context. So 2 areas of context we need. One is our Zoho CRM information, where we're gathering the information from Zoho CRM to prompt this entire task to start off. The second, we spoke about the sales process and the sales playbook. So in terms of knowledge, this is an area where we can go and add in specific knowledge from our environment, and you can see a number of different areas that you can look at. Firstly, public websites. So if you've got information sitting on a site somewhere that you want to utilize, the Copilot Studio can actually use that as an input into your functions. However, we've got playbooks. So we want to store that information in a location that all our teams can find. So we use SharePoint on our intranet, and we store the data there. You can connect through to things like Dataverse or upload files. But the nice thing about uploading areas from SharePoint, as an example, is that you can choose a library and keep updating that library with information, so it becomes a lot more dynamic. Those are just the featured options. We also have a bunch of advanced options where you could look at Azure AI Search or SQL, even straight through to Salesforce, Zendesk. Unfortunately, there is no connector here for Zoho CRM, which would have been nice because then I could have connected that as a knowledge source as well. In our case, we're going to have to prompt the Copilot Studio with our data that we retrieve from Zoho. We've incorporated our sales process, which is a doc sitting in SharePoint. You can see the nice little SharePoint icon there. And we've also disabled the ability for AI to use its own general knowledge. So this AI component is driven by a model behind the scenes. In this case, GPT 4.0. It is monitoring all of our information that's coming in and then using GPT 4.0 to generate answers. But I want my answers to be very specific. We said we don't want hallucinations. We only want information that it finds within our knowledge base, and so we turn off the abilities for it to just produce answers. It has to come out of our sales process documentation. Secondly, we have our actions. The one easy one, sending an email. That's an Office 365 Outlook, integrates directly into Copilot Studio, so the solution tells your action what it must do. And let's go and actually have a look at that in terms of the actions. When we open up the action to edit, you'll see the details where it tells it exactly what it should do in terms of this email. Email, quite simple, being, the operation sends an email, but there might be inputs and outputs. So in terms of an input, we need to either get it a value dynamically where we can tell the workflow what value it should be looking for, Or alternatively, in this example, I've just set it to myself, so it's sending me an email. The second part of it is how will the agent fill in the subject? So here we've said dynamically fill in the subject off of the user's response. And if there are any other additional settings, it will start pulling that data, and we can provide the info as to where it can find that. So those are the actions. Now, I showed you the Office 365 action, and that's a great action, pretty static in terms of you get an email, you send it off to someone, works pretty easily. But what if I want to do something more dynamic? What if I want to take the information that I've just prompted and send that somewhere to store? And we'll discuss that in another series. But there we can start pulling in things like send a user custom notification. Now, if you know your Microsoft icons, that icon might look quite familiar. It's a flow. And you can utilize Power Automate and send Power Automate specific details from the Agentic agent and kick off additional actions. Simplistically, you might just be using that to do something within your environment. Maybe you want to send a Teams communication to a channel and you want to do it utilizing those types of tools. That you can do. It's an extension of this agentic agent. But what about if I wanted to call another agentic agent? Remember that these are autonomous. I'm letting these run by themselves. So if I needed it to call another agentic agent to go and do some work, what a better way to do that than kick that off with a flow that can trigger a child flow in another agentic agent and therefore chain our agentic agents together. So very useful piece of functionality. And then quite importantly, we have triggers. As per the name, a trigger starts a process. And in this case, you'll see a little timer clock next to the trigger. Gives us a little bit of a hint that this might be something that kicks off on a schedule. Well, it does. The same process is used as the actions in that you can import a trigger. And what does a trigger sound like? Well, it sounds like a workflow. Guess what? It is a workflow in Power Automate. We can trigger the solution, and let's open that up and have a look at the actual flow that we've got running behind the scenes. Might give you an insight as to where we get the data and how we kick off this process to start off with. So we start off our flow with a manual trigger in this case. So something is kicking this off. Now, we'll show you that in terms of one of the other flows, but this is the exact example that I was talking about where we can link multiple flows together, and therefore linking those flows allows us to link our multiple agentic agents together. Once we get that data, we then process the deal to Cosmos DB. Now, why would we be doing that? This is quite important when it comes to your agentic agents. You want them to become more and more clever, and therefore, one of the ways to do that is to start tracking the history of any of your interactions. What is a better way to do that than storing your data in a location that is AI friendly? So Cosmos DB becomes a very useful tool here in looking at history. You'll see on many of the agents, if you choose it to store history, it automatically creates a Cosmos DB for you. In our case, we've gone into Azure and we've created a Cosmos DB using on top of MongoDB to store all of our history. And that means that we can understand these processes a little bit deeper. So let's go back to our use case. We spoke about a CRM manager not needing to chase up salespeople because now our agent is doing it for them. But what happens if they start ignoring the agent? Well, we want to know that. So we can start recording the history of what the agent's asking them to do. If they get the same instructions 2 days in a row, 3 days in a row, we can then escalate that. So very important in understanding that context. You don't need to do this part. That's obviously something that we've added in because we've seen the applicability of it. Once we've done that, we go and get our Zoho CRM details, and we do that by passing in a Zoho CRM API. We obviously pass through an authentication token, and within that, we're looking at the deals. So we name all of the columns that we're looking for in a specific deal, and with that, pull all of the information out into an array. Once we've got that, we go and get note information. So here we've got two separate areas. We've got a deal on one hand, which contains all of my deal information, And then we've got a relationship with the deal notes, which is stored in a separate table. So we call 2 calls to Zoho API here. One relating to the deal, the second relating to the latest notes for that deal. Okay, now that we've got our deal information and we've got our note information, it's quite important to create a consistent output that is now going to be sent to Copilot. So in this case, I use a compose function to create an object. That object includes the ID, that's the deal ID coming from Zoho. Any of the deal data that's actually an output, it's an object in itself, our last note, and then finally our deal URL, which takes us straight back into Zoho and allows us to create that link. So if we send out any notification via Teams or via email, you've got a link back to the deal within Zoho. The last point is that a prompt is sent through to Copilot to say, use the content from our output that we just generated in that compose function. So let's actually go and have a look at this in a run. So we'll jump back into Copilot Studio. And one of the nice things is if this is not published yet, you can actually go into your trigger and we can test it. This loads all of the previous runs of this solution, and we can start the test, and it grabs the information from that run in Power Automate. So what you'll notice on the test side here is it triggers being detected, and you can see one of these Zoho objects that has been used to gather the data. On our left-hand side, we can actually see what it's doing in the background. So in terms of the activity, it's highlighted that there's a knowledge source being our SharePoint sales document. Now it's gone and it's started to process, and you can actually see down here it says processing, and it's sent off an email and then called our flow as well, where it's passing through the deal ID as well as any of the notes with that deal. Now, in terms of the email, we can go and have a look at that action. It's sending an email to Craig Tarr. It's pulled together a subject line based off of whatever we've asked it to in the Agentic Agent. So it's figured out a custom subject line. And then you'll notice that the body of the email is pulling through a table. And that table, it's going to have a look at it in our Outlook email. So in terms of the table itself, sent through an email to Craig Tarr, we can see what the current status is. So this is in deal stage, proposal, price, quote. Probability of closing is 90%. Well, that sounds quite unlikely if the last activity on the deal was the 21st of the 11th. And the risk level is high because there's been no activity for the last 3 days. We can see that there's a closing date for March, and that the sales cycle duration is 378 days. We can also see in terms of the last notes what's happened with that client, saying that they'll get in touch with us between February and March, and then there'll be a follow-up in terms of road mapping, etc. Finally, we've got our action items. Now, this has nothing to do with CRM. This has all to do with our sales process in the SharePoint document, where we've got our sales cycle and what needs to be done. So in terms of that, it says, schedule a follow-up meeting in mid-March to discuss the business case and potentials, prepare detailed proposal highlighting our solutions, maintain regular contact with the client, and then we've got our link through to view that deal in CRM. And quite importantly, let's keep everyone upbeat. So we've thrown in a quote as well that can keep people inspired in terms of their role. So jumping back into our solution here, just to take you through what we've done. We started off with that Agentic Agent by giving it a description of instructions. That tells it to listen to our trigger, which kicks off on a daily basis and sends a deal update to any of the sales staff. In terms of that update, it's sending it currently via an email and as well calling a flow, which could be calling another Agentic Agent. And it's all underpinned by our sales information around our playbooks that are stored in SharePoint. In terms of the flow, it's augmenting the information with our deal information from Zoho CRM. So without having that Zoho CRM knowledge source as an area that the model could learn about, we're sending or injecting that information directly into the Agentic AI. So that's it in terms of the Copilot. The next time we're going to look at things where Copilot goes a little bit crazy in terms of the studio and how we can solve the problems of the lack of tokens, etc. But we'll get into that in the rest of our Agentic series. Thanks for your time.